Welcome to the Founder Series, a platform where we sit you across visionaries that help redefine industries and shape communities. Today we have gone deep into the fields, literally, with a man whose work has helped redefine the hope for smallholder farmer entrepreneurs in the region. His name is Mr. Sunday Silungwe, the co-founder and director of corporate affairs at Good Nature Agro. Good Nature Agro started with just 40 farmers and now oversees over 30,000 farming enterprises across Botswana, Zambia, South Africa, and Malawi. My name is Katako Matilda Gotwaitsi, and welcome to the Founder Series.
My name is Sunday Silungwe, and I'm one of the co-founders at Good Nature Agro. I grew up in Zambia. That's been my home. I have grown up around agriculture, so everything that concerns me is usually around food, the people, and how they're basically living their livelihoods. I am a development studies student. I mostly ventured into what's called development economics, just trying to understand how livelihoods are made, what makes it more impactful for them, what ideas can be generated around the community, and just understanding that people are not just numbers. There is always something behind the numbers. So that kind of impact. I grew up in a small town called Monze, which is an agricultural-based town. That's where I did a lot of my upbringing up to like mid-high school. Then I moved to the east. It's another big farming community there. So the difference in those two places is that one of the places has got scale. You've got big commercial farmers there. They do livestock, they do poultry in large scale. And the eastern province is a very different place. It's bigger, but small-scale farmers exist there. So that's where I saw a lot of indifferences, which also led me now into venturing into my career. So I've got two stories about what led me to study development studies. One of them is that I was forced by my parent. I think we all have to be real, that in Africa, sometimes the choices you make and the people that you become are influenced by the people around you. I think you know the adage that a community raises up a child. So my parent always knew that I wanted to be some form of social kind of person, a facilitator. I grew up loving science quite a lot. Then somewhere midway high school, I hated it. I grew up as a librarian. I read a lot about what's out there. I wanted to go to space at some point. So I'd pretend that my room is actually a spaceship and I'm seeing stars and all that kind of stuff. But then over time, I realized that I wanted to be around people. I wanted to solve people's problems. I wanted to understand what really causes people to be poor, when they've been given so much, when they have access to a lot of influence from external people, from themselves. Some even have, they sit on minerals. But that kind of understanding comes from really following where you come from. So for development studies, again, I'm just going to emphasize that I followed the route of economics. That's to also understand the power of whatever it is, whether it's currency, whether it's whatever they're generating. So that was a bit of my passion. I didn't really want it at the time I chose it. I honestly just wanted to go for hardcore economics, but I realized that it's a people thing. So in making that decision, my parents said yes and influenced it. And then I also chose it because I knew that I'll be impactful in that area. I wanted to work for the UN and all those nice organizations out there. So Good Nature Agro has been somewhat of a progression of my interests. Growing up, we grew up in two different towns, like I said. In those towns, what always stood out for me was how people always found something to do. There was a sort of an entrepreneurial kind of symptom, if I would put it that way. Everybody needed to make some form of money. So I think as we were young, we would be sent out to town to go and sell ice blocks. I think here they call them ice pops. But ice blocks were basically you mix some colored juice, whatever it is, you make some flavors, freeze that stuff, and then you go into the streets and sell that. And then we would also sell fat cakes. But that was influenced by my mother. So as I grew up, I always had something next to me that made a bit of cash. So when I went to university, I didn't have access to ice blocks and, things had changed now. I'm in university. So I started to do printing. I did printing for quite a long time. I did some IT stuff. I would fix computers, even as far as getting tenders for one of our local phone companies and repair their computers. Then it progressed back into what I really want, which is the passion for agriculture. So I started to grow vegetables. And then as I grew vegetables, I realized that they could generate a bit of income for me. I even helped my parents to pay for school fees out of what I grew. So I grew pumpkin leaves and sweet potato leaves. And then as I was nearing the end of my studies there, I realized there was a lot of farmers that made no money. Now I could make some of their income in a very short space in school. 3 months was enough for me to generate something like 6,000 kwacha. I think they'll be equivalent of about 3,000 pula. And then the farmers would wait a whole year to make that 6,000 kwacha out of a hectare of maize. So as I was getting exposed in those communities, I said, I think this entrepreneurial aspect, coupled with a lot of what I had learned in school, I could actually turn this into a major project, answering what the country was suffering from. So Good Nature Agro was reality for me, going back into communities. When I saw farmers that did not have incomes, when I saw farmers that did not have access to reliable markets, could not even afford loans, were not bankable, if you would put it that way, that made this reality for me. And then the biggest one, which I mentioned, is there was no diversity in the crops that were growing. So it was maize, cotton, tobacco. When you can have all these other vegetables, legumes, and other crops into the mix, growing your sort of income base. And then that allows them to make a bit of money. So it was passion. It was a little bit of the drive from entrepreneurship, realizing that you need to do something. That led me into Good Nature. So yeah, that's a little bit about what started it. So I think entrepreneurship is a crazy thing. I feel like whoever goes into it has to have, a very weird mindset where you just realize that what you're going to get into has to work. When we started, I wasn't seeing the big bucks. I wasn't seeing whatever will be, it'll grow. So with the 40 farmers, it was more of, let me just try this project. Let me help these farmers. In fact, I feel like the first few years of entrepreneurship, especially the kind of entrepreneurship that I mean, which is called social entrepreneurship, social enterprise, they call it, is you go in there with a very heroic mentality. You see injustices, you want to be part of the solutions to get people out of those injustices. So with the 40 farmers, I was everything. I was the accountant, I was the trainer, I was the, basically running operations. I was making sure that everything is running. But of course, I had two other, co-founders with me. So there was Carl Jensen, who's the current CEO, and then Kellen Hayes, who's also the sort of the chief of party now. Kellen comes in with a background that is very helpful because she worked for a lot of companies. She worked for Autodesk, notably. It's one of the big companies when it comes to design and stuff. So in that mentality, we shared what is called design thinking. By the way, Carl and I met at a design thinking seminar. And we're all trying to solve what people needed to be, whether it's agriculture, whether it's farming, whether it's fabrication, whichever it is. So the design thinking theory is to basically collaborate with communities, different people with different ideas that are facing a problem to sort of solve that problem. So it's not about us coming in with a solution. It's about working together, community, to come up with a solution that turns into either a product, a service, a business, whichever it is. So in our case, Carl and I met, and then we thought of influencing the 40. So in that 40, you have to kill everything about what you know. You're not the economist in there. You are the trainer. So I'm going to take you back now. So in my third year of university, I got a very good opportunity to focus on missions. So it was a 4-year course. But then in that last year, I got an opportunity to go to the US, get exposed into what they called biblical community development. And in biblical community development, you get exposed to a lot of creative stuff. It wasn't just focusing on the Bible. It was also about technology, what they call appropriate technology design. It's a good thing to look up. So in that, when I came back, so that's for fitting the last 1 year of school. But then my school allowed me to defer. So I wrote my exams and left, and I came back only to graduate. That's what led me now to go into that design summit where I met my co-founder. So when we were together, we shared a room. So most of the time, when we're not tackling the summit issues, and the summit was 1 month long, quite long. It was hosted by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They had a project in Zambia, and they were looking at communities. So I was looking at actually fabrication projects. Carl was looking at a grain storage project. So out of that, realized that farmers actually needed more than just sorting out their problems on their side. So I consulted for Carl's team and then realized we have the same passions. We just wanted to go and make sure that farmers, in this case, communities, move out of poverty into the middle class, which is now our tagline. So Good Nature's mission is to move farmers from poverty and into the middle class. So when we started as a technology company. We introduced post-harvest storage equipment into the community with that first 40 group of farmers. But then as we grew, we realized that we are not actually only going to provide technology. We're going back to work with the farmers. We found more diverse problems. So the mission remained the same, but the model changed. We were transferring technologies into the community. Now we realized that the people that were trying to sell these technologies to didn't have the cash. So we needed a form of generating the cash. So the first year was the very first year of also pivoting correctly. So we started to become a hardcore agricultural project. So now we realize that the farmers don't have cash. What causes that in our case? First of all, they were lacking trainings. And then second of all, because they lack trainings, they don't produce, quality products, or they're just really barely living the minimum. So we introduced a loan program. And then thirdly is, if they are producing tobacco, cotton, or maize, these are crops that are, they're known to the globe. The demand is always high depending on which place you land. But when you realize it in our locality, maize is a staple, so the prices are low. Everybody has it, the price is going to be low. You can't bargain. No matter how you clean it, you sell it at the price that's been set. Tobacco, they say in the globe, I think tobacco is reducing by 0.2% every year. So meaning it's not a favorite thing. And I'm sure all of you don't like smoking. Yeah, might be quoted for that. But then cotton, now you're competing with synthetics. I'm probably wearing synthetics right now. Yeah, it's not, real cotton. So that has also reduced the demand on cotton. So we wanted to look for crops that can work for every farmer, small scale. First of all, we've got farmers that have land, access to land, it's arable. So we need a crop that makes money for them. So we chose legumes. So in the first year, we chose legumes, and these legumes consist of beans, cowpeas, groundnuts, you name it. So these are the crops that we realize can, first of all, make money for the farmers. They bring an income. For each of those legumes, for each of those crops, I said, tobacco, cotton, and maize, you are earning about $115, $119. You can do the math there to the pull or the kwacha. It's not much. But on the same hectare, you can grow legumes, and they're going to earn you almost 3 times as much. You're going to get $777 on each hectare. If you do the math, which one would you choose? You go for the higher number. And also, less intense. They basically earn people money, 1. 2, they are good for nutrition. When you're sick, they'll tell you go and have soya, some peanuts, whatever in your food incorporated. You have a balanced diet. So it's good for nutrition. Thirdly, they are good for adding nitrogen to the soil. So they drop leaves, it becomes biomass. Biomass is good for the crops. And then everybody needs them. So demand is high, so which is what makes the price also pretty good for the farmers to sell. So that model is what we've kept for the last 11 years. It has pivoted in many ways that I can tell you business has changed. We don't have 40 farmers now, we have 30,000. And the story has changed in such a way that now we can replicate the 40 in multiple places. So it hasn't changed as much. It's the impact that has just grown.
Today's episode is proudly powered by Decor Waves, Botswana's leading manufacturer in upholstery, curtains, and cushions.
So growing the company to where it's at today, over 30,000 farmers in Malawi, Zambia, Botswana, and also South Africa, has taken a lot of a mentality shift, mindset shift, and also relying on what you have as internal resources, whether it's cash, whether it's people, whether it's your sort of your factories, whichever it is that has come. Scaling is not the easiest thing to do when you're doing entrepreneurship. But one of the best things to do is relying on what I just said, those resources. And I think for me, the biggest one has been our kind of human capital, the people that work for us. At year 5, I just accepted that we're not the people that can initiate, first of all, dream, initiate, and scale. We need to bring people that are way smarter than us. So we've targeted people that can jump on board. And I'll tell you, most of these have been referrals, and some of them have just come because they're really excited about the impact that we're doing. So with 30,000 farmers, it means you have to have a lot of people around it. So right now we've got over 200 people that are employed by Good Nature Agro across those countries. And each one of those is playing a role to either look at scale, look at efficiencies, look at production. We've got multiple departments. It takes quite a lot. So the impact is felt. We are producing over 19,000 metric tons just in Zambia. The rest is being spread across, and we've put these as strategic growth areas. If you look at Botswana, it's a good supply place, so you send your crops here. South Africa, the same thing. There is a lot of mechanics here. There's a lot of there's a lot of expansion that's happened here. There's modernized production in South Africa, for example, and then in Zambia, the place is arable. You can put almost any seed in the ground, it will grow. Of course, there's drought now and all kinds of stuff, but it needs training. It needs the people to grow it. It needs you to facilitate an environment that can grow it. Malawi is the same thing. And then if you look at South Africa and Botswana also, it's got very good opportunities around producing with small-scale farmers. What we work with is what you call an outgrower model. And the beauty about an outgrower model is we don't have to own the farms. It's the farmers that have access to the land. They either own it or lease it, whichever it is. We can gang it up with them, and then that grows the impact. So we're not working with the 100,000 hectare farmer. We're working with the 100 farmers with 1 hectare. That's what the scale is. But I don't mean 1 hectare really. Our minimum is around 3 hectares, and then you can basically grow from there. So in each of these countries, we're looking for those kind of farmers, and we're working with those. So the 30,000 that I'm talking about and above is farmers that are really focused on growing 3 hectares and above, and they've done a good job at first of understanding our mode of trainings. So for each 40 farmers, we have 1 extension personnel. This is a college-trained personnel, and they make sure that the farmers have access to a bit of tech. They have access to a place where they can give their feedback to and from, where they're training. We're also learning and making sure that they are answering our questions. Then on top of that as well, they have mobility. They're in the community, they're working with the farmers, so they understand each and every farmer intimately, not in a bad way. They get to know the farmer. They know their field, they know their homes, they know their children, they know their ambitions. And then they work towards that to make sure that this is not just a transaction. This is a long form of livelihood. So the model in itself, like I said, is out of a felt need. When we took technologies to try to sell, we realized that the people we're trying to sell to did not have the money. So when we came back, we realized that they needed a model that's lasting, sustainable. So one of the things that I read through going through my course, development economics, is that there are a lot of failed models. A lot of models will come with aid, give people 1 or 2 t-shirts, remain billboards, and then when the intervention moves, everything moves with it. A lot of poor countries have gone through aid, and we don't want to mention some of the aid organizations because we work with some of them. But we are now trying to bring this mentality that everything has to be extremely sustainable. So with the model itself, it's a way that allows us to sustain it. So when you look at trainings, it's you can't take away a training from somebody. When you exchange knowledge, you need to impart it in such a way that it's helpful for generations. You can update it, but you can't take it away. So if we say we're going to plant peanuts because the peanuts are in demand in South Africa, the farmer has to know what kind of planting. If they're in a place that's waterlogged, it's a different kind of farming. In a place that is flat and deserty, all those kind of things you should know. But that knowledge sticks, right? Secondly, we should also be aware that farmers, especially the small scale, and I'm talking about Zambia in this case, South Africa, Malawi, these are also different scenarios. We offer them differently. But mostly for Zambia, you realize that, the farmers don't make as much to keep for next year. They have targets that are short term, which is why every time we work with them in the year, beginning of the year, they give us dreams. I'm going to buy a tractor. I'm going to paint my house. I'm going to buy a car. I'm going to take my children to school. So that goal has to be met, but then it needs a bit of finance. And for growth to happen, in the first year, we don't offer anything that's risky to us. We offer them half a hectare. They get inputs for half a hectare. It's a loan. But the loan has to have a mentality that needs to be paid back. So what we've changed in the model there is we don't get cash back, we get crop back. Yeah, because that's what the farmers have produced. So for every kilogram they're given, 2 kilogram comes back to us. Then the excess that they produce, we buy it at a premium. So the premium can be anything from about 15% to about 32%. Goes up. That makes a good portion of cash for them. So that's the second part, is the loan. So you can entrust the farmers with the loan. They pay back the loan. They give you back the excess, and then you basically collect it. The third one is where we look at markets now. So the model allows us to get whatever has been produced and then send it. Now, I'm going to clear that out in your mind. The bigger model, which is why we are sustainable, is that we look at end markets. I think it's very important right now to look at entrepreneurship, especially around food, or I think anything. You realize that it's very important to be market driven. So you need to know and get your information and your research right about what's obtaining in the market. So in this case, we look for processors, aggregators, those that are in the end market, whether they are canning, whether they are roasting, whether they are bottling, whether they're turning, all these products into food. So for soy, you can turn into oil, you can turn into soy chunks, you can put it into alternative proteins for, away from meat. For peanuts, the same thing. You've probably heard about peanut butter. I'm glad that we're supplying a big brand which is called Tiger Brands in South Africa. If you're on the shelves, you see, your Black Cat peanut butter, Tokoman, a lot of those. There's some of the brands that we supply to. So some of the peanuts you're eating are from us. So there's oil coming from there. It's peanut butter. There's, again, supplements that come from there. I can mention all the crops, but at least you get the kind of format I'm talking about there. So once you have these markets thought, then you analyze their demand. And that comes a year in advance, 2 years in advance, sometimes in a few months in advance. That's what informs our production. So we go back and basically enlist farmers that know there's a market. We can either connect those brands to our farmers, or we become the broker. Basically, we buy it, we supply them the seed. The model that we create is the farmer basically grows for us, multiplies the crop. It goes to another farmer. I think it's actually very nice for me to say that we have two brands. One is a commodity brand. Commodity means it's crops that are produced for consumption. And then we have a seed brand. So Good Nature Seeds produces seed. Seed is for multiplication. You can say one is for investment, one is for consumption. So seed is for investment, and then commodities for consumption. What gets processed into oil. So the seed brand basically gets the orders from aggregators. You can almost imagine it as a 4-point thing. So point 1, we talk to aggregators. Point 2, we back up on what their needs are and turn them into quantities. So you can say you're 100 kilograms when they've asked for 10,000 metric tons. Point 3, we have farmers that are in that model. We supply them with training, a crop loan, and then markets. So in that point, they basically grow the quantity to about 10,000 from, say, 1,000. And then it moves to the next stage, which is customers now. So people that buy our seed as Good Nature Seed can also enlist to become our basically customers for the seed that then goes to the aggregators. So that point 4 there is for the farmers to produce the seed that we buy, then supply to the aggregators. So it's a full circle. You basically get the needs, you bulk up your needs, you make sure that it's actually ready for the markets, and then the market take it up from you. So that model allows us to be long-term sustainable, and that's what has made it easy. In this Same model, if you look at it, you can add chickens, you can add eggs, you can add anything. The principles still remain the same for pretty much anything in agriculture for the value chain.
Today's episode is proudly powered by Decor Waves, Botswana's leading manufacturer in upholstery, curtains, and cushions.
Working around smallholders I would say it becomes a very involving thing. It becomes a very sort of like spiritual connection, and I think I used intimate in the other question. It becomes very intimate. You get to know people, especially with that first 40 group. I hosted them last year when we were celebrating our 10 years, and just the transformation that has changed, like visible transformation, is amazing. These are people. It's been 11 years, so you can imagine that 11 years they have taken kids to school. They have built homes. They have bought cars. These are people that, when you say $115 on a hectare per year, it's not a dream to have a car. You have to think of survival first. It goes back into the, economics calculation of like living on $1 a day or less than $1 a day, $1.5, whoever coins it correctly. But when you realize that, just increasing that a little bit from 115 to 777, and say you put that at 3 hectares, people are able to afford amenities, education, health, livelihoods. They change status almost instantly every season that they're growing something. And, it really makes me emotional to go into these communities and to see, we come from Zambia, where I started, that 40, it was thatched homes. So it was, you put grass at the top of the roof, and there's a clay structure at the bottom. And now people are buying cement blocks to put foundations that will last for a longer time. They're buying cattle. I don't know how many stories of cows people have brought to me. Some of them even naming the cows after the company and whatnot. By the way, my co-founder and I have 2 kids that I think one is 3, the other one must be 2, named after us. Just taking the name and say this is what's there. So the transformation, honestly, is I can't detail everybody's story, but there's that for the farmers. But there's also a big one, which is also for the employees that work with. For the farmers, let me just say, each of the families, especially in Zambia, is composed of about 9 people. The parents and then 9 kids. So we're not counting the parents there. That means you have to feed those every day for 365 days. So whatever comes as income needs to come and impact those 9. So when I say 30,000, you can do 30,000 only. It's over 30,000. You can do the math times the 9 for each of the families, average. And then when you go to Malawi, same picture. South Africa is a bit different. We've gone for commercials, same as Botswana. So that's a bit different. But the impact is huge. So that kind of transformation of people just having a source of income, being able to look at farming, which was mostly a very not so sexy youth thing. It was a retirement project, or it was classified as a rural thing. When you are in the community, you are doing nothing, you can just plant things and wait for them to grow. No. Now it's being seen as a business that we're going to take part and make sure that it actually helps us to achieve the next goal. So the transformation that has happened in the last 11 years is just so immense. I've grown as a person. Our employees have grown. Going back now to that point of employees, each one of them is also a breadwinner. They make sure that whatever they get to earn on a monthly basis goes and trickles down into their families. They're investing in their education. They're investing in their futures. Just so much has happened in such a short time. And we're happy also to just say we are also part of making sure that the government also reaches its goals of making sure that people move from poverty. And so it's in our tagline. So we basically are a partner in that sense to make sure that whatever goals have been aligned in these countries around agriculture are becoming real. So the Financial Times last year listed us as the 44th fastest growing business in Africa. And in Zambia, we're actually number 1. So, for a country that's got a lot of entrepreneurs, big businesses, Financial Times is a very crucial calculation. They just don't pick it from anywhere. They really get down to the numbers. And we're just trying to look at the pace of our revenues, our growth, and all that kind of stuff, and just kind of the sheer impact that we're doing. And it was, first of all, a very startling, startling news in an exciting way. It made a lot of validation for the kind of model that we have. If we wanted, we could be in any form of business just because we're entrepreneurs, be selling planes, or you're not saying that it's bad, but we wanted to help people. And we are, when you're in a social enterprise, your aim is to just make sure the people that you're serving are okay. They have everything that they need. It's a bit different. You enjoy profits, but the profits make others. So when you are listed as the 44th fastest growing business, then numbers like you have 30,000 farmers and above in the mix at year number 10. It comes as a very good way of validating your model, first of all. Number two, it's also a source of pride where you know that you've created something and it's worth being noticed. And then number three is that it's actually making an impact that you want. So that was an exciting one. We got a lot more other few accolades after that, but it's been nice to see that one. Food business, just generally, is what keeps people going. Usually when I start talking, I usually just try to ask a question. Have you had your breakfast? Have you had your lunch? Have you had some form of food? Just know that there's a farmer somewhere in that chain, whether small or big. They made the food, and I think you need to give a proper salute to the farmers because they made what you are eating. Soon it will be printed, or some robot will be creating it somewhere, but we'll call that robot or AI a farmer. So for the time being, I would just say Africa is in a very interesting position to actually be a global, trader of food. We have the arability right here. We've got places that you can do organic practices if you want. It's not got chemicals or anything. It's there. So we are basically placing ourselves to be part of the forerunners when it comes to producing in groups. With the model that I've outlined, you can replace the crop with anything else that can also be in the agriculture value chain. You can train farmers on cows, make sure that they get the cows on loan, and make sure there's a market for meat. It's an agro model. Most of this, you kind of find it. It's not rocket science. And believe me, we're not the model designers. We realize that it works that way. And then we put a private sector face to it. So this is not new. But then when you put a private sector face to it, it becomes sustainable. So you have to work with the market. So imagine you producing something that can be sold to the whole world without any barriers. But first of all, we have to feed ourselves here. So Good Nature's dream would like to be existing in most of the African locations, which we've started with Southern region. They're interested in us going to the West. We've just talked to Ghana last year. We had a whole trip of people that went there. East Africa is a place that we've also been going to. So in terms of growth in location, that's one. Number two, when you're in agriculture, you need also to accept that there's technology involved. So we're actually creating Africa's biggest agricultural platform in terms of aggregating data, making sure markets are linked, and all that kind of stuff. We've got a whole full-time IT team that's building that day and night. So right now we've got a farmer engagement tool that allows us to track each and every farmer, trace every product that's produced. We know their locations, we know how much they're producing, we know and also can communicate things like droughts, or its effects or its potential to them, so they get weather information. All that kind of stuff is in one place. On top of that, we've also realized that we are building something that can also scale for other stuff. So I talked about cows as an example, but the real thing we're doing right now is assets. So you can't sell an asset, but you can acquire it for production. So our farmers being eligible, farmers are growing to become eligible to assets. So if if you've been producing well and you can be able to afford a tractor, we bring that tractor closer to you, either as Good Nature or as a partner that does tractors. And then you get it as a loan, and then it helps you produce more. You pay back for that input, or whatever, asset, and then it becomes yours, and then you own it for generations. So some of those milestones allow us to say that we're not just working with the farmers to supply, but we're also growing them. We're not just growing their incomes, but the ability to think legacy. And that allows them to have bigger and better investments, whether it's assets, whether it's land, whether bigger plans. So that allows us to work there. So those are some of the milestones that we've done. On top of that, we are also trying to grow our production base and our processing base. Production base is just a number of farmers around who can supply, but processing base, we've got 2 full-fledged factories in Zambia, all of them quite modern and to scale. They can process almost each and every dry crop. And we're also thinking a bit horizontal to start seeing what else we can add, whether it's value add, whether it's processing of some of these things to an extra level that brings in more, income. And then, of course, it's just to grow the kind of human resource that we want. That's another milestone. I talked now, we have over 200 employees, I think 215 to be specific. Each one of these is multi-talented. They need to be ambitious. Some of our values are, we are positive people. If you meet me and you meet our team, you find that they're very good people to talk with. They're good stewards. They're a true representative of what the farmer wants. They are farmer-centric. Their mentality is around farmers. They're always trying to see what the next solution for a problem that exists, or just to make sure a problem doesn't come to existence. They're innovative, always thinking about what's the next way to solve that problem by bringing something innovative. They're also very, very transparent. They will tell you about their dealings. They'll be very open and forthright about what they need, what needs to be done, and when. And last is that we're very quality-centered. So everything that we do, whether it's crops or whatever you see on the shelves, we'll make sure that it's coming from us. So part of that mission is to grow that brand and just make sure that it's a reliable brand, which I think 11 years of existence will tell you something. Okay, what are the growth gaps for countries in agriculture, for countries like Botswana? I feel like, first of all, I think the knowledge base is a very deep, usually concern for a person like me who's looking from sort of outside in. When you just want to venture into some of the opportunities that are around agriculture here, it's very hard for you to get your information right, and sometimes it's not the issue of farmers not venturing into agriculture, but it's also just like the knowledge for them to get into that agriculture is very scanty. We've got a lot of good extension here. I think there's a very good system that works. People can access extension, ask questions, but when it comes to things like, do they understand their soil too well to make sure that they make the investment, whether in a crop that they really know, I feel like that lacks a little bit. And then also, I think the kind of background I come from, the career that I want, and what I look for Botswana is just like there's so much power in putting people together in groups. There's been efforts for that, I think, in the sort of horticulture area where people are supplying, crops like, spinach, and I think they're growing potatoes. In the last few years, there's even a ban on some of those crops coming from outside the country. I think there's a lot of power in that. I wrote my thesis in development around cooperatives and how they operate, and of course at a gender perspective. But one of the things I learned is that cooperatives have a serious power. But then there's also an outgrower mentality. So you don't have to be a cooperative, but you have to have the same mentality towards an aim that's already there. So in this case, if you know that there's a lack of corn or sorghum, how do you incentivize people to grow it in small portions? Doesn't need to be 200 hectares. How can we start with the next 1 hectare with a lot of knowledge around how that hectare is grown to supply to an existing market that's ready to offtake it, which is what Botswana already has had, for example, which is what a lot of countries like Namibia has already had. I think for Botswana, it's BAM. For Namibia, I forget what it is. For South Africa, there's off-takers waiting. But then they need to invest in, the knowledge that goes into the people. How do they grow it? When are they getting it? How are they selling it? And then you have this power to sort of dictate, not dictate per se, but to inspire them to be in groups. So my 1 hectare combined with the next farmer, then we have this barn, and doesn't even have to be like official infrastructure. It could be as simple as a depot. My day is Tuesday at 10 a.m. I submit my 1 ton, and then I get paid 20 days 30 days, whichever it is, as long as there's already consensus that's there. So that for me works for anywhere in Africa. You need combined groups. There's just an effort that just says we need to be there. But what changes? Extension. You need people to know what they're venturing into so the quality is not missed. So they say the grain size is this, the planting day is that, the implements are this. They know all the answers around agriculture, and then they know that they're in a group. And then you also bring in things that are also competitive at play, so that nobody just jumps into it and say, I'm a farmer. Competitiveness, I mean, for example, if you have a group of 10 farmers doing 10 hectares, and you know that the results of, for example, John is not the same as Mary, is not the same as Susan, then maybe Jack decides not to supply. So there's 9 farmers. Everybody in the group, because they've not been together, has to pay for Jack's mistake. And then you know how to grade everybody's crops. So there's a grade A, gets a certain amount. Grade B gets a certain amount. Grade C, in our case with Good Nature, we reject grade C and D, going downward. We just say you're now messing with what's called a credit score. You did not attend trainings, you did not attend quality, you did not supply the quantities we wanted. We might put you aside and wait. So that maybe you're not a farmer, you're not a crop farmer, you are maybe an artisan, or you can grow something else. So if you invest in those little things, it helps. Then the other big thing for me, I think, in sort of some of the gaps is just to allow private sector to do their thing. A lot of what sort of disturbs the energy to get into agriculture and invest in it in the way that you'd want is the interference of the government. Sometimes other policy or certain demands that can come with sort of the level of impact that you can do, whether it's your sizes, the number of farmers, how you work with them, all that kind of stuff. If it's put down to paper that there's a separation between private sector and the impact, then that works perfect. And I know in countries, most countries are working towards that, just to make a very proper private sector driven economy. But then there's also what you can call private and public interests. So you can create that, whether it's the government trying to partner with the private sector, or the institutions that are community based partnering with private sector, so that understand there's a win here and a win there, and we combine our efforts. Government is happy with their taxes and making sure the people are making enough for them to get from there. The communities are also happy because they're getting paid, and the private sector has something to offer to the masses, whether it's producing it for export or just sheer cleaning it here. Another gap is what I just said, getting quality standard product that's ready for export markets. Most countries are facing fiscal issues, and it's usually like a foreign currency that is not there. And one way to boost it is to export. So your crops outside the country, be able to offer something that goes out of the country. But if you don't produce quality, and most of the off-takers are off the continent or in the continent but require very strong quality standards, then you're not going to make sure your money comes in, right? So you spend time at producing the standard, and that comes with a bit of force as well. So I talked about the credit score. You can talk about the grading. You can just make sure you understand the demand and also how to have proper relationships with whoever you're supplying with. So say, for example, the sorghum that we're producing in Botswana, or in my case, I would be interested in producing beans. I make sure that it's beans that meets whether it's Cephalana, Choppies, specs, and if not, if it supersedes, then we also send it outside. It goes and brings a bit of income that then makes money for the country. I'm paying tax on that, and there's also a lot of exchange of cash coming in. It's not going to come in Pula, it's going to come in USD or Euro, whichever it is. Then you have a base then to sort of work in that partnership. So just sort of running that down through, you need a lot of cooperative effort. So basically, organized groups. Secondly, you need to understand that extension plays a very big and crucial role. And thirdly, you need to start thinking outside the box. So what can we do for a lot of value add? And also just try to make these proper relationships that bring in some kind of foreign investments. One of the interesting parts of our model is to become what's called a continuity plan, which is why we have accepted to work with almost all kinds of sectors, whether it's your donor organizations, previously USAID, some of the EU, organizations, and one of the things that they are all now starting to focus on is a continuation plan. What happens when a project that's 5 years, 2 years, short term runs out, and the impact that you wanted needs to be sustained? So you need to look for private sector partners that have a social impact emphasis. So the aim there is not just always being the direct recipient of donor aid or whatever it is, cash, which is what most organizations are primed to be, is also to make sure that there is impact being passed on. In our fourth year of growth, we basically accepted a lot of this. We started at year one, and at four, a lot of projects had died, and then they brought their farmers and said, "What can you do with these?" And we worked with them. Some of them are still with us for a long time. One of the organizations on mission, but we got over 11,000 farmers, and we're working with them, and they're still working with us. And the aim there has been to make sure that there is some form of sustainability that's there. So it's not just about today. There's tomorrow and after tomorrow, and then tomorrow's tomorrow, whichever it is you can put it. Just make sure that there's sustainability. So it's been nice to have that unison. When you are primed as a social enterprise, your aim is impact, but most of all, you have to be for profit, and then the profit is then what makes the impact be sustained. So that's one of the reasons why we've worked with some of these. So when there's a grant or whichever it is, we can still apply and say, hey, we do this. We will not be interested in just the numbers. Can't promise you the world, but we are sure that if we put our money right in this investment, it's going to pay off for the next numbers. Then you have this number sustained after the investment. So besides the sort of the donor side, and which is the kind of focus that makes us look like an NGO, which we are, but then a social enterprise, which is for profit again. We need also to be very real with what growth plans and growth stages require. So being for profit means that you also have to rely on different sources of funds coming in, but to make sure that those, the money that you make is sustained. So we've had, all forms of investment, is what I would say. From our first years, we used our own cash. Then we've actually used what they call the FFFs, family, friends, and foes. So it's 3 Fs if you call it that way. Family meaning ourselves first of all, and then our families knew that we are going into business, so we asked for money. And that money could come in for anything, operations, whatever it is. And then we went to basically friends. So anybody else that's also in the wider circle that could have a bit of cash, could tell a story. And they know and understand what the return on investment is. And then they basically invest in us. And then for us, it's a bad way to use, but basically means you can go for hardcore investments now. So we've been able to basically we've raised a number of times, but the biggest ones, of course, we did our Series A not so long ago. It was quite a large amount. It was about 2.1 million USD. And then recently, just in the last 2 years, we've also raised our Series B, which closed about 8.5 million. But on top of that, there are what you call yearly needs. We are a very capital intense business. When I say 30,000 farmers, it means you have to pay each one of those. And sometimes you don't have that in your money. You haven't made that in your profits always. So there's what you call working capital. And working capital allows you to get money at a very low percentage. And we've mostly relied on offshore funders to do that. Buy your product, turn it into the product that you want to sell. When you make your money, pay back what working capital is. So that fundraise is quite huge. I'm not privy to share numbers right now, but it's way beyond that raise I just talked about. But then on top of that, you also have what you call capex, which is your your investments into machinery, buildings, and all that kind of stuff. And we've basically gone through all that cycle. What makes us stand out is that we're very good at making sure we've got a sort of an orderly way of getting this capital. Most entrepreneurs just feel it's a matter of just reaching out to a bank and borrowing money. And by the way, we've gotten money from banks as well, which is very recent. But then the biggest thing you need to do is be in order. Have all your ducks in a row, whether it's your audited financials, your accounts very clear, you have all your SOPs ready, you have your plans and dreams, in this case, projections, very clear. Now, once those are understood, an investor is able to see your books and invest in that. You don't want to invest into something that doesn't pay off. And then I also just like to, usually when I talk about investments, you talk about your kind of story. If you go and reach out as an entrepreneur and just say, I want money, you're not going to get it. You need to tell your story. Your story should then bring you your money. So if you want to ask for money from an investor, you're going to get advice. If you want to ask for advice from an investor, you're probably going to get money. You can think about how that works, So that's part of the little bit of our fundraising journey. The legacy question is a big one. When I was building this, I knew that first of all, I call it as the reality onion. You have to peel the layers. Is the first part where I'm just saying, I want to go and save the world and make sure that everybody gets their thing. Everybody's going to get the money. On top of that, there's also another layer on top of me that says this thing has to be impactful. Then there's another layer which also says this thing has to be impactful for me. Meaning I also have to make what's mine, right? Yeah, and live a comfortable life and just make sure that I go, wherever I want, however I want, without the constraint of just always thinking what's there. And on top of that, there's also not only about me, but people that are, around me, whether it's family, whether it's people that are really invested in this. And the legacy of Good Nature is basically that first core level I talked about. There's a bit of superheroism in there, but it's not the kind of superhero that we're talking about, just, making it for others. No. But everybody has got a legacy plan inside there. When I tell you that farmers have been able to get money and send their kids to school, some of those kids we have employed. This is a fact. So they are part of seeing what legacy is from the onset. This is something that I can come into and see grow forth. So the dream about Good Nature for me is just to make sure I build something that outlives me. Something that can save generations. And when you talk about food, like I joked in the other question, we're not at the point where we can 3D print beans yet. You can't tell AI to provide food for you right there and then. When we get there, before we get there, we're going to produce. And producing means somebody in the value chain is a farmer, whether they are a very sophisticated farmer or small scale in the sense that we work with. So the legacy is to make sure that people are dreaming into supplying into this and it goes long term. It has to be something that can be talked about. It has to be something that can be felt. It has to be something that can be lived as some kind of lifestyle. So for me, legacy is just making sure that this is also growing, not only as a Zambian project. Now that we have a few countries of presence, it can go global. This model can work in Asia. This model can work in the Americas. Wherever it is that we want to take it, it can grow. So the only limitation right now is just our ideas making it get faster to where it is. And of course, there's capital, of course, involved. There's dreamers like us that are out there also trying to do their own thing. If we combine forces, the legacy can be grown big. Yeah, we have to share the legacy. Okay, so a little bit of myself is I've realized that I value a lot of what people do. So I'm a natural facilitator in what people are thinking about, whether it's just making sure the livelihoods are good. I am creative, so a lot of what I do is around thinking. So right now I'm handling what's called the head of corporate affairs. Before that, I did communications, and then I also did marketing. So a lot of what you see, whether it's the brand, the logo, what it looks like, that's all out of my head, and it allows me to think a little bit about how I can get to the next thing. I get consulted a lot about that, so there's a bit of brand in there. And then the other thing is I have also learned to value sort of my spirituality around what I do. So I'm mission based, always thinking about how to pass on Christ next. Don't hide that one. I find myself really reflective in that place. And then on top of this, just to couple of all this, is that I have learned that whenever you want to grow something that grows global, you have to be able to speak. I say I'm an introvert. I think I've grown out of it. Believe me, I was a very quiet person, never spoke a lot. But when you want to tell your story, you have to talk. And it means you have to be very focused about what you're going to say. And then on top of it also, it has to be meaningful for the people that you carry with. So in this case, when I speak, it's not only about me, but the brand that I carry. I think the first few years of our business, we learned that we need to do things in the background and not be seen. So most of what you see even online, you will see a lot of our farmers and not us. But over time, we've also learned that brand comes with people that originated the brand. And you don't always have to be there. You don't build yourself to be in the picture. You build yourself to be away from the picture, but still be part of the elements that built the picture. So it's important for us to talk. This is why I'm actually excited to be part of this presentation.
For more conversations like these, follow us on our social media platforms at Project124 Africa. For more engagement, insights, offers, as well as our trainings, follow us at our website at project124.africa. My name is Katako Matilda Godzwaitse, and this is Project124 Africa, sprouting ideas, igniting growth.